You're looking for a UPS that actually lets you walk away from the rack without worrying that a voltage dip or a brief outage will bring your whole network down. You don't want a box that just shouts specs on a data sheet, you want something that fits in a tight 19-inch rack, holds up under real-world spikes, and gives you enough backup time to shut down gracefully or ride through a short outage. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I started digging into rack mount UPSs for a small office server room, the first thing that kept me up at night was the fear of overpaying for a unit that looked impressive on paper, but fell short when the power actually flickered. The market is packed with 5 kVA models that promise sine wave output and long run times, yet many of them either take up an entire rack unit or need a separate battery module that makes wiring a nightmare. I also read a handful of forum threads where people complained about UPSs that claimed line interactive, but still let brownouts ruin their storage arrays. Those stories made me skeptical and forced me to ask, which unit really balances density, protection, and cost for a modest server setup? The TRIPP LITE SMART5000RT 3U is positioned right in that sweet spot. It delivers a full 5000 VA of 4000 W rating, which is more than enough to keep a typical 2U server, a couple of network switches, and a small NAS online. What sets it apart is the true sine wave output that runs continuously, not just during battery mode. In practice, that means devices that are sensitive to waveform distortion like enterprise-grade routers or high-performance storage controllers won't see the jitter you sometimes get from cheaper stepped approximation UPSs. For a small business that runs a VoIP PBX and a handful of virtual machines, that clean power can be the difference between a seamless call handoff and a dropped connection during an outage. One of the first practical things I tested was how the unit fits into a crowded rack. At 3 rack units tall, it occupies the space that a typical 1U server would take, leaving room for 2 more pieces of equipment above or below it. That's a big win if you're dealing with a 12U rack already packed with blade servers, and a UPS that swallows 5 or 6 units would be a deal breaker. The front panel is simple, an LCD that tells you input voltage, load percentage, and estimated runtime so you can glance at it without pulling the rack doors open. The controls are all on the front, which is handy when you need to reset after a power event. You don't have to fumble around the back. Runtime is where the rubber meets the road. TRIPP LITE lists a 38-minute half-load runtime. In my own tests, I set the UPS to about 2 kilowatts load, roughly half of its capacity, and let it run down. It gave me just over 35 minutes before the battery hit the low voltage alarm. That's plenty of time to either let a UPS managed shutdown script finish, or to wait out a brief utility interruption. The catch is that once you push the load toward full capacity, say you add another server, or a power-hungry SAN, the backup time drops sharply, falling into the single-digit minute range. For anyone who expects to keep a full 4 kilowatts rack online for an hour, you'll need to add external battery packs. TRIPP LITE offers the BP48V modules that stack onto the rear, but that adds cost and takes up additional space. Speaking of cost, the SMART5000RT 3U isn't the cheapest 5 kVA UPS out there, but it's competitively priced for the features you get: true sine wave, line interactive voltage regulation, and a compact footprint. If you compare it to a larger 5U unit that offers similar capacity but no sine wave guarantee, you're actually saving on rack space and cable management. However, if you're on a shoestring budget and your equipment can tolerate a stepped output, you might find a lower-priced entry-level model that meets your basic needs. The key is to weigh the extra protection against the upfront price. Another practical aspect is the line interactive regulation. Unlike pure offline UPSs that simply switch to battery when the voltage falls out of range, this model actively corrects brownouts and overvoltages while staying on utility power. In a suburban office where the utility occasionally drops to 110 V during heavy load periods, the SMART5000RT kept the output stable at 120 V without ever dipping into battery mode. That not only preserves battery life, but also prevents those subtle voltage sags from causing data corruption on spinning disks. For a small data center that relies on RAID arrays, that continuous correction can extend hardware longevity. Who should buy this? If you run a small to medium server room, a network closet, or a workstation lab that needs reliable power for sensitive equipment, the SMART5000RT3U hits the mark. It's especially appealing if you have limited rack space and want a UPS that won't dominate the layout. Companies that use virtualization platforms, VoIP gateways, or any application where a clean sine wave matters will see a tangible benefit. It also makes sense for IT managers who want a